Welcome to our 10th annual Photoville Festival, proudly supported by our lead anniversary partner, Leica Camera USA. And today's program, How to Capture the Essence of a Moment with Sheila Pree Bright in conversation with Devin Allen, presented by Leica Camera USA. First of all, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are on the unceded lands of the Lenape. Photoville exhibits visual stories in public spaces across the city of New York, which is located in the traditional homelands of the Lenape, also known today as the Stockbridge Munsee Community, Delaware Tribe, Delaware Nations, and First Nations in Canada. Lenape call their homeland Lenape, which includes southern New York State, all of New Jersey, eastern Pennsylvania, and Delaware. We respect and recognize those who came before us and the experiences they had to endure. We commit to understanding how history continues to inform the present and to work on how our organization can keep supporting Indigenous communities. We encourage you all to research, read more into the history of your community and region, and support Indigenous artists. Hi everyone, good afternoon or morning, evening. My name is Laura Romanis and I'm Photoville's Executive Director and co-founder. We're a small nonprofit focused on community and education through photographic public art, providing more platforms and streams of revenue for visual storytellers. We've kicked off our 10th annual festival with over 80 exhibitions that are not only displayed in Brooklyn Bridge Park, but in all 5 boroughs of New York City. We're so grateful for our marquee partners, Brooklyn Bridge Park, New York City Parks, Two Trees Management, Photo Wings, the New York City Mayor's Office of Media Entertainment, and the Dumbo Business Improvement District. And of course, again, our 10-year anniversary partner, Leica Camera. And now on to our main event. This year, for our 10th year, our friends at Leica Camera decided to come on board as our 10-year anniversary partner. Back in 2012, when we had the idea for Photoville, we had a handful of partners who thought it was a great idea. Not many thought that public art and containers were a great one, but one of those partners who thought it was wonderful was Leica Camera, and our partnership has grown ever since. I'm in awe how they've embraced our community spirit. Not only are they supporting the operations of this festival in a big way this year, they're helping to produce programs such as our safety clinics, which we just had last week, and also our professional development workshops with Diversify Photo, and making exhibitions with Indigenous photograph a reality. 2 amazing exhibits that are featured prominently this year and have already seen over 100,000 visitors come by are the exhibits by Sheila Pree Bright and Devin Allen in Brooklyn Bridge Park. 2 voices that I have long admired, and I'm so excited they're here with us today in conversation where they'll be discussing the images that bear witness to the moments of humanity through an eclectic visual story of music, culture, and creative freedom. So with that, I'll hand it over to Devin to start the conversation, and I thank everyone. Sit back and relax and enjoy.
Hey everybody, I'm Devin Allen, Baltimore-based artist. I'm super excited to be here again with Photoville. I've been lucky enough, have been a part of Photoville since 2015. I've been able to show my work in multiple spaces, in containers, and also online exhibitions with Photoville. I'm super excited today to be here with Leica and sitting with the GOAT herself, Sheila Pree Bright. I'm gonna tell you a little bit about myself. We kicked off these Leica conversations, the first one with the amazing photo Dre, which was amazing, so definitely go check that out on YouTube. But a little bit about me, I'm a Baltimore-based artist, most known for my documentation after the death of Freddie Gray in Baltimore, Maryland, where my image was landed on the cover of Time magazine, making me the 3rd amateur photographer ever with the cover of Time magazine. And I will return later, last year in 2020, after the outbreak and civil unrest of George Floyd, to return again 5 years later on the Time cover magazine. But I was lucky enough in 2015 to meet Sheila Bright early in my career when I was just getting started, and she walked around Baltimore with me, came to my very first exhibition. So I know I love a good origin story, diving into a photographer. When did they get, that tick, that nag, that joy of falling in love with this medium? And I know the story, I heard it verbatim, but like Sheila, let's dive into that origin story. What made you pick up the camera and, start snapping photos in the first place?
Thank you, Devin, for that. Yes, long time. We haven't seen each other since, I think, 2016. I want to thank Photoville and Leica for giving us the opportunity to share our stories. So in undergrad school, I took a photography course because I'm very shy, very introverted. And I wanted to know more about people because I come from a background of my father being in the service and traveled around a lot. And so that's how I actually got started in photography. And it wasn't until I graduated and moved to Houston, Texas, I started photographing in the community. And I was very curious about the hip hop culture when it was hardcore rap and gangster rap. So I used to hang out in the neighborhoods and say, I'm going to photograph rappers. And so I started photographing independent rappers that were on independent labels with doing their promotional photos. And Rap-A-Lot Records saw my work and I started working for them. And with Rap-A-Lot Records, I started with, you could show the images, the Scarface. And so that's how I got started in photography. And I'm self-taught. Started just like you, self-taught.
Yeah, can we pull up some of those images? There's a couple of her earlier images that I love, you know, those images down in Houston. You know, if you're a big fan of, like, you know, Houston rap, you know about Rap-A-Lot, DJ Screw, Scarface, Ghetto Boys. You know, let's talk about that. You know, as a person that, you know, loves hip hop, grew up on hip hop, obviously. Just going into those spaces, you know, I grew up in Baltimore. I shoot a lot of my rapper friends, you know, but we had those relationships. But how was it coming from your background, not from that community? How did you, you know, implant yourself in Houston in that scene? You know, it can be, you know, kind of tough for rappers, you know, these people that, you know, are looked at as icons to let down their guard, you know, to capture some of this intimate imagery you were able to capture. Let's talk about how did you come into that space, gain that confidence, but also gain their trust, you know, to capture these intimate moments.
You know what helped me a lot, to be honest with you? My naivety. I went into the neighborhoods, and what I would do, I would engage the people in the community and told them who I was, and said that I want to start photographing. And so photographing these portraits of these Black males. And my first portrait that I ever shot, I didn't know this though, it was an independent record company. The guy that owned it told me that he wanted me to come to the house. And I said, why do you want me to come to the house? He said, come to the house. So when I came to the house, there was about 10 or 15 young Black males there. And I was like, why are y'all all in this house? And what are y'all doing? See, that's the naivety that I have. All of a sudden, two guys came out with AKA guns. I don't know why I didn't put that on there, AKA guns. And I looked at them and I said, are those real? They looked at me and said, where you come from? You like a white girl in a Black body. And so I think with my naivety and me not having fear in those spaces, they allowed me to come in because I always asked the question why, and very curious, and I was not afraid. So I was the girl in Houston, Texas to shoot all of that. Okay. And at the time, you don't know as a photographer that you're making history. And when I photograph, I didn't know that back then. I'm always looking for moments, but I'm looking for the quiet moments. I want that connection because I am very shy, very quiet, and I want someone to see that. And that image right here is of Scarface. And we were trying to shoot promotional photos for his, The Diary, his album that came out, The Diary, Hands of the Dead Body.
Yeah, that's awesome. You talk about the quiet moments, you know, and imagery. And a lot of times I'm a person that believes in that. You know, I'm a person that I like to let my images speak for themselves.
Right.
You know, and I'm always looking for something. You know, I was one of those people that kind of stumbled on photography. You know, one of my friends was a poet, and then he had a little camera, and then I took his camera, and then I had to give it back. And then my grandmother helped me get my first camera. And I just found myself just looking for something and looking for something. You know, you're an amazing storyteller. So like, how do you start a story? You know, for me, my stories found me. You know, I had a camera, my community need me, needed me and I was there, and it kind of wrapped itself around me. And it has been a story I've been telling, you know, for going on 6 years now. But when, you know, but how do you go about, you know, when you find a story, does it find you, you know, or does it just come from one image and then do you build around it? Like, what's your process in storytelling?
For me, to be honest with you, I'm really interested in popular culture. So whatever I see in popular culture, I always have that curiosity because, for example, when I started photographing hip hop, and back then it was very negative. Hip hop was very negative and all of that. So what I do is always trying to find the beauty in what I'm shooting. And so those stories, those are how they are developed with me. So I'm really interested in individuals and communities that are not unseen in the world, you know? So that's how I always start my body of work. It's just like with the imagery now of the making, the work that's at Photoville. I call it the making because guess what? I was thinking about Curtis Mayfield, the making of you. And in 2019, I went to Afropunks, and the subject of Afro theme in 2019 was Carnival of Consciousness. And think about it. We've been coming off all of this Black bodies being falling down from police brutality, right? So I feel that Afropunk, it was a place to go and it's a safe place. And so as I entered there, I did not know that I was just going to focus on women. It wasn't until I went into this other space and I saw these women up on posing for all of the photographers. But I wanted to capture something else. I wanted to capture them while the photographers were photographing them. And those are the quiet moments that we're talking about. It's like one of the images of a full shot of a woman. I looked at her, she was the only one. I said, I want to photograph you. She said, me? I said, yes, you. And she got up on that stage. If you could show that photograph, this one right here, and look at the posture and the gesture that she had. And I think she was so excited because someone was paying attention to her. Because I think right now we're in this period about women and how to protect Black women. And this was their safe place to go to be whoever they wanted to be in their identity.
Yeah, shout out to Afropunk.
Right.
I was there in 2019 too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was there. I came up and shot, did some portraits for Afropunk. I've been going since, I think, like 2014, 2015. So like even me going up there as a photographer, you know, being in Baltimore, a fairly small city, the first time I went, I just was like overwhelmed with like this Black power and Black energy, Black love. Like, so many Black people, so many dope people. Everybody was just so free. You know, I learned a lot up there. You know, I learned about, you know, just using the correct pronouns. I just learned so much while I was there photographing over the years. But let's talk about Black women. You know, definitely in the field of photography that has been dominated by white males for so long, you know, and as a person who's fairly new to the photography world, I see it all the time. I feel it all the time. You know, sometimes it can be frustrating a lot of times when we can't speak for ourselves as Black photographers. But, you know, I'm one person that I stick to stories that I can connect to, you know. I remember I was asked to go shoot Women's March, but instead of me going to go shoot and get paid, I passed that job off to, you know, some Black women and women of color. Say, hey, why don't you hire them? You know, like I'm gonna shoot my own stuff, but I don't feel like I should be getting paid for this. You should let a woman go and capture this imagery. But let's talk about navigating that space as a Black woman. You have these Black women photographers, brown photographers that constantly get overlooked, you know, but what I've seen in this insurgence, definitely last year, you know, Black women coming together, you know, championing each other across that line. And I love to see it. I love to see all these women, Black women finally being seen, but even just navigating the freelance space or, you know, getting those gigs and those jobs to turn into a job is pretty difficult. Let's talk about that. How are you able to navigate that space as a Black woman, as a photographer?
I could start when I first started out. Think about in the 90s. It was so much harder. You didn't have Instagram, you didn't have this technology that we have now. And you really don't get any respect as a woman, let alone a Black woman. So for me, I think for me is my father is the key for me, how I made it as a woman in photography. He told me this. He says, when one door closes, another one will open. And I've always looked at it like that. There are spaces now that I have carved out. I had to make things for myself. I couldn't wait. You know how people always talk about a seat at the table? If you are waiting around for the seat at the table, you will never get it. So you have to have a tough skin, and you have to just do the work. I focus on the work first. Secondly, I built relationships. Relationships are so important. That was told to me very early on. And I was also told that you're good as your last picture. And for me as a woman, it's just that I constantly beat the streets. And I've developed relationships with curators, photo editors, publications. And that's how I, as a woman and as a Black woman, has able to keep navigating myself into this, because it's still male dominated. We don't really get, and it's not a complaint, we don't really get the opportunities like males have. And I really commend you for not taking that job and say, hey, give it to a woman. And I think we as image makers, we all need to look at that, as far as that. And as far as women is concerned, I feel that I love that. I don't know her name. You have to forgive me, that she started the Black Women Photographers Organization, Polly. Yeah. And yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I really like how she's really the force of pushing Black women out in the field. Because it's not easy at all.
Yeah, definitely. She's awesome. I've been following her for a while on Twitter and Instagram. Like, she's awesome. Her work is good. So definitely check her out. If anybody has her Instagram, please put it in the chat. And then don't forget, we also are taking questions throughout this talk. We got a little bit of time. So definitely, this is the GOAT right here. So get your questions.
You call me the GOAT? I don't feel like I'm the GOAT.
The GOAT. You got to own it. So when I say the GOAT, when I say GOATs, definitely when it comes to photography, is like, I'm very young in my career.
Okay.
I got my first camera in 2013. So, meeting photographers like rest in peace, Robert Houston, we got to chill with him.
Oh, yes, we did.
He passed away, he became a mentor to me, but people like, I got to meet Anthony Barboza and, Deb Willis and Freddie Roy and, all these are the GOATs to me. Y'all the GOATs, because y'all came before me. So any Black photographer that came before me, I always try to study what came before me so I can understand where I'm going, to forge my own path, So let's talk about, I really want to dive into, we talked about navigating as a Black woman, but one thing you touched on is relationships. And that's something that I've been able to foster and which have, landed me at places with like the Gordon Parks Fellowship and things like that. Let's talk about that, building the right relationships and being in the right spaces. And I love what you said earlier about waiting for that seat at the table. I'm not a person that's going to wait for the table. My mom always say, go build your own table.
Right, right.
Let's talk about some of those relationships. Let's talk about some people that might have inspired you along the way. Some people that might have championed you, that put, that battery, like in Baltimore, we say, oh, you got that battery in your back.
Right, right.
That's what we say in Baltimore. He put the battery in your back. So
right.
Like for me, I had so many people help me. They'd be like, yo, how'd you get in the Smithsonian? Well, Aaron Bryant put the battery in my back,
Right.
We'll talk about some of the people that have championed you forward. Even some, some photographers we might not know that have inspired you along the way. Let's talk about that inspiration and that help.
Well, first of all, I have to mention Deb Willis. Deb Willis is very instrumental in my career. When I first met her in Texas, I was introduced to her by another artist and she wanted to look at my work. I was so terrified. I was like, no, it's not ready. It wasn't until I moved to Atlanta. One thing about Deb Willis, she always stayed in contact with all the Black photographers. And she has put me in spaces that has developed into other relationships, from the Smithsonian to, I mean, she has me in most of her books that she have. And then to this day, she's a champion to me because she's always inspiring me. She's always pushing me. And I really, it's honored that I was able to meet her and see what has come of her and how she keeps, I mean, she's putting a book out every 6 to 3 months, you know? And so that is one person that's very instrumental in my career. Secondly was Curators. When I first came to Atlanta, like I said, I'm self-taught, and I'm photographing. And I went to school to get my degree, MFA there. And so when I graduated, I said to myself, I'm just going to focus on work. And there was a curator from I can't think of the name of is it Guggenheim? From California that came to Atlanta. And at that time, I was working on a new body of work called Young Americans. And he came to my studio, the curator of photography in Atlanta. And he looked at my photography, the curator at the High Museum of Art in Atlanta. He came to my studio and saw 2 or 3 images of my Young Americans. And this is what he told me. He says, I got to help you. And so with that relationship, he decided, he didn't know how he was going to help me. He didn't tell me about a show or anything like that. He had me go speak at this big convention of curators and museums people. That was my first talk that I ever had. And I was so afraid, almost through the it was a rolling like speaker desk almost off the door. And that's where I met more curators. So it's all about relationships, because you never know, like if I met you now as an artist or me as an artist, you never know if you're going to be a director or curator, because relationships are so important. And I don't think a lot of people understand that to this day. I think we have Instagram and all that, and we curate our own work. And I get a lot of my work from off the, believe it or not, Instagram now. I got 2 or 3 commissions off of that from just the work. So I think the biggest thing that I could tell you is relationships are important. And don't get upset with someone that you meet that you think that they should have done something with you. Maybe it's not the time. The time might be later on with that. And it's hard because even though the accomplishments that I have made, I still have to beat the streets. It's like when I got my first show at the High Museum with the Young American series, I thought I had it made. And nobody was knocking on my door. You still have to beat the streets, you know, with that. And don't be afraid and carve out your own way. You don't have to do it the way that it's supposed to be made. Carve out your own way.
Yes, definitely. That's something that I learned growing up. You keep saying beat the streets, and I love that. That's something that I learned from growing up in the hood. Relationship, like
okay, right.
You know, like growing up in the hood, like I knew this older guy on the corner, so nobody wouldn't bother me. You know, and I knew the guy at the corner store, so I got discounts. So that it's the same way in life. So I definitely agree. I went through the same phase, and I love what you touched on. That I think a lot of artists deal with. We have these monumental moments that happen and think we got it made, but we still got to continue to keep pushing. Yeah, you know, for me, you know, like, and then, you know, I know it's a lot of photographers on here, and we have some questions rolling in. You know, you touched on a lot of these questions already, but I'm gonna bring some on back throughout. I think let's talk on failure. I love talking about failure before we dive into these questions. This is my last question before we dive into.
Okay.
But you touched on a little bit. You talked about how like sometimes you might meet a person and they let you down, or sometimes they feel like you should have had this opportunity or fallen through. As a person, I failed so many times, but I never really view it as failing because I always learn something from it.
Right.
I've had times when I've done shows and it didn't turn out the way I wanted to, or I did an installation, it didn't turn out how I wanted, then it turns, but people still like it, so it's not really a failure. But let's talk about, a moment where you felt low, but it was monumental in your growth maybe, and it opened something up in you that made you greater or better. Let's talk about that.
I'm going to go back to the High Museum of Art in Atlanta. I was just coming out of grad school, I think maybe 2 or 3 years after. And I had the opportunity with the curator at the High Museum, told me that he wanted to give me a solo show. First time coming out of school for an artist to have a solo show, and received a major grant from the Aetna Foundation. And what happened was, they said, Sheila, we're going to give you a residency, but you got to go to Hartford, Connecticut. And when I went to Hartford, Connecticut, there was nothing set up. I was supposed to have a studio, and I'll never forget what the curator told me. They gave me an event or a party, and he looked me dead in my eyes, and he said, Sheila, now it's on you. Do you know how that feels? Because you got to produce, and you're having a solo show. And I was having a lot of issues with different personalities, and I had to navigate through that. I never forget when I was in the studio, I wanted to come back home and say, forget this. I cried. And the associate curator came in there because we became friends, and she said, suck it up. You're gonna get this done. And so when it comes to what we see, I'm gonna just say Instagram or on Facebook, it's not all we have to have that business side to us too. You know what I'm saying? And you got to deal with a lot of personalities. I'll never forget when I came back I had to suck it up again, talk to the director and told her how I felt, but in a professional way. It's like you have to stand up and don't be afraid. And that's a lot of fear. And when I got back to Atlanta, I'll never forget the CFO wanted to go to lunch with me because they were like, how in the world did she get all that money? And she told me, I'll never forget what she told me. She said, it's not about the arts, it's about the money. So we as artists, we have to, we go in, it's like, we're going to be free and we're going to talk about this, do that. It's a whole nother side of this too, along with producing art. Okay. And I'm still learning. As long as I've been in photography, I am still learning. And I like it because I think that's how we grow. Because somebody asked me, what would you do? Would you change anything with your younger self? No, I will not, because I wouldn't be the person that I am right now. And I wouldn't go through these tribulations and trials that I'm gone. It has toughened up my skin. I mean, I have applied for so many grants, even up to this day. And do you know, Devin, don't get them. Okay.
I've never won a grant that I actually applied for. Most of my grants I've been lucky enough to get from fellowship at Gordon Parks, or Russell Simmons gave me a grant. But even in my own city, I can't even get a grant. You talked about business. A lot of times, excuse somebody's rhyme past. It's Baltimore dirt bikes all up and down the street. But you talked about the business side, and we overlooked that so much. And that's one thing that I understood early in my career. Because it happened so fast, it was literally like, got my camera, 2 years later, time cover. Now it's like, I had to learn about copyrights. I have to learn about all these contracts. I have to learn about deeds and, how to lease my work. I had to learn that off from the get-go, out the gate.
Even how to price your work, right? Licensing.
And that's something that I'm still learning right now, how to price my work, not lowball me. Once again, relationships, I've been able to learn how to price my work, not lowball myself, learn about different papers and things like that. But let's talk about the business. It's something that I struggle with. As a creative, I'd rather just go put my head down and just make the work. But there's those moments where you gotta not make anything, do this invoice, make sure you responded to emails, making sure you can make those business meetings and those lunch meetings. Business is a 50-50 thing, because it's like sometimes you can create some horrible art that can, or blurry photograph, but if you can sell it, you can talk it, you can pitch it.
It's all about branding.
It's all about branding. So let's talk about business. Like, how did you learn that? Did you learn that in school? The process, and how did you build that infrastructure around you?
I learned none of that in school. I went to grad school, did not learn. It was trial and error, like you, okay? And if there's photographers that have been in the business for a long time, if they're willing to open up, that's how I learned. Because when I first came out of school, how I became nationally known was a body of work called Suburbia. And back then, people wanted to buy my work. I didn't know about edition numbers, so I was like 25 or 50. And when I got to a gallery, they said, no, that's too much. You have to keep your edition numbers low, not high, because it holds the value of the work. And so it was always trial and error with me. And also too, with pricing your work. You have photographers now are at a very high price point, because I think we live in a different world. But when I was coming out, I was charging $500 for a 24 by 30 Suburbia print. And now that stuff is $8,000, $9,000, $10,000. Okay. So I think that I feel that us older people, I'm older now, you're the younger generation, that we are the gatekeepers, and we should be open and free to be able to talk about what you were talking about, licensing. I don't know everything about licensing either myself, and I'm still going through that, learning that, so it's forever learning in this business.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I'm still learning how to price my work. Like I said, I took a year off photography just to study the art world, on what paper should I use? Is this, I used to just go to Staples and print.
Oh yeah, the paper. Yeah, the paper. No, like Devin, that paper is important.
It's more important than the image. You need
archivalness. Archivalness.
Yes, like, I shoot Leica, so I use a German-based paper. That's
right. But you need to let me give you this. Have you heard of digital silver imaging? Eric London. Okay. Yeah, he's very, very good. Everything is archival. It's expensive, but it's worth a while.
Yeah. If it's not archival, photographers don't bother, because it's going to age. As soon as that sun hit it, it's going to change colors. And study your paper, study the different glasses and techniques you can use. I've even printed on, archival with aluminum, all different things, depending on if it's a shoulder, a quick turn, I'm always ready to go. So we talked about business. We talked about the art world a little bit. We got some good questions in here. Let's talk about technique. Everybody has a different technique when they're doing portraiture. You have, my approach, depending on what mood I am and where I'm at. Like a lot of my beautiful ghetto series that I worked on, it was mostly just me and my community. So that a lot of these people already know who I am, it's me, fly on the wall, but when I go to Afropunk, it's totally different.
It is.
When I'm at Afropunk, how do I stop a person? How do you identify yourself? I start a conversation. I try to get their name. You have to get it really, really quick to make them feel comfortable in your presence, to capture that true essence. So it's a lot of different ways you can go about it. Sometimes if I see a person captivates my eye on the street, if they in the moment, I won't touch them.
Right.
But if I see a lady on a porch, with her kids or something, and they're just chilling, that's a conversation. Even, if I'm storytelling, I worked on a story for BuzzFeed around the opioid crisis, where I spent, half a year with a recovering, he called himself an addict, but I had to go in, and for the first month, I didn't take any images. I had to understand him, love him in my space. So let's talk about some of those techniques you use to capture what you call those quiet moments, and some moments that are not quite as quiet, but can be seen as being loud.
Afropunks is one of the images that I shot of the other women because I only knew two of them. The rest of them I didn't know. So what I did, I'm very observant. I moved around to see how the photographers were photographing the women. And so I took a different approach. And then I wait. I'm just not clicking, click, click, click on my camera. I'm waiting for a moment. And because I'm trying to, even though I didn't have direct contact with them, I was waiting for a moment that connected me with them. And that's why I call those quiet moments. When you see my imagery, even the work behind me with the young Americans, that was so, so different. A lot of individuals came into my studio, did not know them. We sit down for like an hour and two and talk until they felt comfortable. And we talked about everything. And so that's my approach in anything. And then going into the communities, you know, I was in Baltimore when Freddie Gray happened. Didn't know you then, right? And I went into West Baltimore and got totally cussed out. I got cussed out to get the fuck out of here. They said, we don't want you here, white people here in our communities, because anytime you come, what are we doing? We're talking about something negative. And you have to think fast on your feet. And me being naive again, I had to think about it real quick. And I said, look, y'all don't know me, but I'm Black just like you. And I'm from the home of the Civil Rights Movement. I want to tell our stories from our point of view. And I'll never forget, they looked at me and bowed their head like they were giving me, yes, you can. And a lady came up to me and started telling me about her, how she just got out of jail and did she have any money? Do you know, I looked at her and I said, and I don't have any money, but I said, I give you a hug. We hugged and we cried. So that's how, even though I'm Black, I'm not from the community, you know, I look at the humanity in people. And if you don't want me to photograph you a certain way, that's just me. I will not do that at all. And that's how I'm able to capture what I call these quiet moments. It's like this image that they're just showing on the screen. These were photographers in the front photographing her, and I was a little bit to the side. And it was that expression that I connected with her. You know, because Black women are looked upon like, oh my God, the most, you know, what did Malcolm X say about women? The most disrespected Black woman on the face of the earth is Black women, and always looking at Black women a certain way. So I just feel that with the work that I did at Afropunks, with this work with the women, I want you to not just look at these images. I want you to listen to these images. I want them to speak to you.
Yes, definitely. And one thing about Baltimore, if you're not from the community, you really need to have a conversation. Because look, I have been cussed out, and I'm from here. I've been cussed out West Baltimore, East Baltimore, you know, and that's something that I respect. You know, this is how I judge a lot of my photographers. It's not always, and I say this all the time, it's like one of my mantras. It's not always about the pictures you take. Sometimes it's about the pictures you don't take.
Right.
Which makes you an amazing photographer in my eyes. You know, even in my own community, I have a certain level of respect. I'm from here, but I'm still going to shoot as an outsider. You know, I'm still gonna have that respect. You know, and I feel that way if I go to Oakland or Chicago, you know, I will hit up, you know, I've spent so much time in Oakland. When I first got there, I wasn't taking any pictures. You know, I wanted to understand the community. I hit up some people that I knew. You know, they took me to where, you know, the Black Panthers was. They told me like the history and stuff like that. So the next time I came back, I felt a little bit more comfortable. I understood the lay of the land, you know, and I could, you know, understand the people more. So I definitely love that. You know, and I think that's very, very important. You know, one thing about Afropunk, any place, you know, when you got all those photographers on one subject, you know, that gives anxiety. That turns me away. You know, because I like to be intimate with my subject. I like it to be a one-on-one connection. You touched on this earlier. This is another question. But someone wanted to know if they had any advice about building relationships with other photographers, curators, and editors. And I think you touched on it earlier, and it's something that I'm really big on. I have to meet people. You know, I genuinely like social media. You know, people build these worlds on social media and think
Right.
they know you, they understand you. Well, you post these pictures, I've seen your family, I know your story, or I know you. And it's like, no, you don't really know me. You know, you might know, well, if you know my work, you kind of get a glimpse into my world. But I found myself, you know, being in Baltimore, that I wanted to spread my wings after a couple of years. So, you know, when I first got into photography, for me, I would just go to New York, you know, on a mega bus. You know, I would make little postcards with like Snapfish and write my Instagram name on it and just go to different shows and go to house parties and give them out for free. And people were like, what is this? You know, and then eventually people, you know, start following me from it. You know, and that was early in my career. And that's how I actually amassed a lot of my following. But you know, one thing, you know, I'm a Gemini, I'm introvert, extrovert. So like some days I want to be out, and then some days I just want to not be out, you know, but I find myself that I have to, when I get invited to things at like these museums and I get invited to these dinners, or I even get invited out to coffee, you know, at first I wouldn't do those things. I was like, I don't know you, what you want, you know, but as I mature as an artist, those things are very, very vital.
Very important.
Relationships, you know, like people like Photo Dre, you know, me and Dre had been following each other for a while. I had a talk with the youth at Steel Museum of Harlem. He's like, yo, you mind if I stop past? And he was like, cool. You know, we hung out, snapped a couple pictures, walked around with the kids, and that been my boy ever since. You know, similar to people like Brandon Ruffin out in Oakland, you know, hit him up, you know, I'm in Oakland, what's up? You know, I was doing something with Visco. We hung out for a little bit, snapped some photos. So when I returned, you know, he took me, I was working with some kids in Oakland. We was able to take the kids out in Oakland, him and my friend, Adrian, who worked at Visco at the time. But we did that gig with, for Under Armour and Steph Curry, but that fostered a relationship where I can call on Brandon and be like, all right, Under Armour has a gig, you know, I need a photographer in Oakland and I can get him paid. And that's like, once you start building those networks, you know, you can throw jobs and opportunities, you know. So for me, I just found it a simple DM. You know, if I'm interested in an artist and I want to meet them, I'm gonna go meet them. If I want to, you know, go meet a curator, I started being the one. You want to go get some coffee? You know, you want to get lunch? You know, so you know, I like to bring those emotions. I like the real world connection, and that's what works for me. But you know, Sheila might be you.
That's how I started out. I mean, when we had social media, I would go up to New York, like you did, little cards. I would go up with a portfolio and go up to, I went to Vibe magazine and they were like, who are you? I'm like, I was Sheila Pree back then, okay? Sheila Pree. And I said, I want to speak to the photo editor. What do you want? I said, the photo editor. And so the photo editor come out. That's how you have to be aggressive with that, you know? And now, what I do is, I think it's very important because some of the art side of it, me photographing that series 1960 now is documentation, but I'm getting back into my place of doing what I like doing that too, but you never know how you're gonna move for me as an artist. But I think what's important, as far as the art world is concerned, to attend photo pairs, attend all of these fairs, have the cards like you were saying, you know, and meet people. And don't get upset if they seem like they have an attitude or they don't want to be bothered. Just get their information and just introduce yourself and go your own way, because you never know what's going to happen later on in your career with these people, like I said before. And that's what I do. I have a list right now because I'm saying to myself I need a retrospect of my work. There's a lot of work that people don't even have no idea that I have done and stuff. And I'm putting a little bit in my storyline because on Instagram, I'm just not putting pictures up just to put pictures up. You know, that's just me. And I feel that I'm working on a book. I want to do a retrospect and I want my stuff to start going to auction. And those are the things that I am looking at right now. I make a list of everything that I want to do. And 99% of the time it happens to me. It may not happen when I want it to happen, you know? And so I think what you have done, I've done that in the past and even more. It's just like I looked at 5 and people say, you're not with a gallery. And I said, well, you have to ask them, you know, and I'm not like when I tell you to seat at the table, I'm not worried about that. Aunt Sheila is going to do Sheila and move on, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I'm not with a gallery. People are like, you with a gallery? No, I have artist in Baltimore by the name of Jeffrey Kent. I went to him, another relationship. He's a painter. He's not even a photographer.
Right, right.
And you know, I've met so many photographers that, like you talked about it earlier, make so many prints. You know, I sell my work, you know, in 5s and 3s and only 3 different sizes.
Right.
And I sell them. If I sell too much of something, I pull back. I take it off the market. But I make it hard to get my work. If you really want some work from me, you just can't email me and get it. I want people who really want the work that's going to like put it in your house and love it, look at it every single day. But I went to him and said, sell my art, you know, and we just went to our first auction. You know, you talk about auction. I just went to my first auction and I was looking on the auction. It was on Artsy and I'm just looking to see if the price went up. Like, what's the starting bid? Like, what's going on? So I went into my first online auction. I'm waiting to see the number, like how far did it go? You know, and like you said, you might not get it in the time that you want it.
Right.
You know, but it's going to come. Like you said, you do the work. And sometimes for me, things come too fast. You know, I'm working on my second book right now. No Justice, No Peace.
Right.
My work from shooting Baltimore protests for Mike Brown all the way up till this year.
Right.
I wasn't ready to do that book, you know, but I was lucky enough, you know, my first time writing, I wrote my intro. And anybody know about a photography book, it's tough. You know,
it is a tough.
Deleting your favorite images. And then once you get the images, like where did they go in the placement? You know,
that's true.
So let's talk about that a little bit. You know, photography books, I find for a lot of photographers, that's some people's bread and butter. It's a way for you to, you know, make good money. You can get, you know, once you get into that publishing world, these publishers, you know, I've been lucky enough to navigate this space because I hang with a lot of authors. I hang with a lot of poets and writers that produce books, that write scripts, you know, here in Baltimore. So like for my process, when I did my first book, A Beautiful Ghetto, I didn't know what I was doing. I just was like, all right, well, I just want to.
Same thing with me with 1960 Now. It was like my first book deal was at Chronicle Books. And they didn't really know. So I was photographing, having shows, and had to do a book and put all that together. That's hard. And like you said, I'm working on my second book, and it's not easy. Like people, none of this is easy. It's a job. It's a job. So it's real interesting because it's pushing me in different ways. I have people coming to me, want to write. I'm doing poetry now. I didn't never do any of that. And it's coming like this. I was stressed out because I'm photographing. I moved away from people right now because I'm really interested in the land. And so I'm thinking about Black future. I'm thinking about the liberation of Black folks through the land. So my first work of landscapes will be at the High. And I have another commission next year, and I written a poem. So I love it because it's pushing me in different ways. And also too, what I like, and maybe where I was at from when I was coming up, there's a lot more collaboration with photographers, poets, painters, artists, and I love that. I actually really, really love that. So I'm just having fun. I mean, I've always had fun, but it's really pushing me in different areas that I never thought that I would be doing. And I will be producing a film next year too. So
congrats. Like, I love that you're going into landscape. I definitely want to see that stuff as a person that like, you know, I got to a point where I was just shooting all people. We got to the point, I just started shooting everything in Baltimore. I found myself climbing through vacants, building installation with things I find in vacants, you know, explore everything. You know, let's talk about COVID. Like, you know, COVID has affected a lot of photographers and a lot of artists. Like, what was COVID for you? You know, I always ask artists that, like, you know, for me, I started painting. I started finding other ways to create. You know, I found myself doing self-portraits in mirrors more often. I found myself, you know, taking pictures of gloves on the street and debris and, you know, moving away from people because I couldn't be around them. But, you know, but I also had time to sit with my work. You know,
that's true.
I got time to sit with it, dive back into my archive and say, well, wow, I didn't like this picture. This picture is amazing. Nobody didn't even see it. Well, let me bring this picture back to the forefront. So like, what was COVID for you?
You see this blue room I'm in? I took this room, my husband painted it blue, and this is the place where I convened at, because we were coming off of all that unrest, social unrest. Yep. And then what happened? We had COVID, and then we had George Floyd. And I didn't know how stressed out I was, because I know with you shooting these protests and all of that is overwhelming. I wanted to get away. I did not want to photograph anymore, not social unrest. I started photographing outside my window, and I live in suburbia, very boring, but they're really interesting photographs. I started photographing flowers, and then HBO contacted me, a marketing company through HBO, and wanted me to do a commission piece. And I started photographing flowers and women, and I call it the rebirth of us. So it's pushing me in digital collaging like I used to with my plastic bodies, but I'm shooting Polaroids right now. I'm loving Polaroids right now. I bought an $800 Polaroid camera from Mint that you could change your shutter speeds and on that. I just bought the new Polaroid I-type where you could put gels on it. So it's pushing me to shoot totally different. I want to do a book of Polaroids right now. I want to talk about, as a metaphor, of Black joy through the flowers, through the rebirth of us.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm so mad we run out of time. I have one more question on here, and I have one more question. I wish we could talk all day. Now, this is a Leica talk. Yes. You know, me, anyone who knows me, I am Leica M10 monochrome all day. That's my baby. That's my everyday camera. But I have fallen in love recently with
the SL?
The SL2 with my M lenses. Like, so I shot recently, I was shooting Dave East in Harlem, and I was shooting with the SL, but with the adapter with the 50 millimeter 1.2.
I have that too. Now I shoot with the SL2, the SL2S. I love the M10. I got the monochrome, and then I got the Q2 monochrome. And you know, everybody's like, well, you don't shoot color. Yes, I do. But I always come back to the black and white. Black and white is like, it's sexy. It's something that makes you, it just makes me think it has different layers to it.
Yeah, I love the draining of it, because it's like, I feel like when I look at color imagery, one, I'm slightly colorblind and I struggle with color. So if I'm doing anything or working with a client, it gives me a headache. But I just feel like black and white, it just gives you the raw emotion. It allows me to dial in what I want you to see right then and there.
Right.
You know, we got, but we got 5 minutes, you know, and this is an important question. You know, what advice would you give an aspiring photographer or a young photographer, you know, coming into this game at any age, you know, but what's some advice you can give to aspiring photographers, you know?
Keep on pushing. You're good as your last picture, and make your own seat at the table. We are able to share our stories, whoever is telling the stories, from our point of view, and we need to stay focused and focus on your work. It's not wrong to being a star, nothing's wrong, but focus on your work, because that's gonna have it's gonna be timeless. It's gonna be timeless. And I think that's so important.
Yeah, definitely agree. You know, Gordon Parks always said, the photograph is more important than the photographer. You know, so I love that. You know, so we about to head out. You know, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I hope you left with some amazing gems, you know, because I'm inspired. I'm about to go out and take pictures now, you know, and roam these streets of Baltimore and capture some stuff.
Well, take some landscapes. Maybe we can do some work together with that.
Oh, I got some.
I'm serious because I'm in the South and I'm taking these Southern landscapes, and there's a
Mhm.
lot of metaphor here within the South in Georgia. So it might be interesting because Black folks really don't get into landscapes.
So you should check out. So I did a show at Leica in Bellevue called Space. It's a show I did in Baltimore too. It's called Spaces of the Unentitled, where we I was looking at disappearing communities due to gentrification in Baltimore.
Okay.
So I shot my dad's neighborhood, which is disappearing, and the community in Southwest Baltimore where I hang at that's being gentrified by the local hospital. So I will send you some of those images. I actually put one of the images I used for a beautiful ghetto with the Air Force Nike.
I like that. I love that.
I go in, I'm shooting, I shoot stuff as I find it, you know, so I'm like climbing through vacant houses and all types of stuff. So look, guys, you might have smelled a Leica collab with.
And I'm shooting with the SL2 with that. Okay. I'm shooting.
Right,
no, so the monochrome too. I'm shooting with the monochrome P.
Yeah, I'm shooting with the monochrome
SL2. Yeah.
So
okay.
You heard it, Leica, you heard it here first. Landscape collaboration show soon. Let's put it in the works. We're gonna shoot with the M10 monochrome, Baltimore, Georgia. So y'all heard it first here. So we definitely gonna do that.
Okay.
Once again, Sheila, thank you for all the gems. It was amazing. Once again, thank you to Photoville and Leica for making this possible. I don't know where you at in this world. Get out, take some images. You know, you can reach us both on social media. I believe they already have it up. Yeah.
Right.
So you follow both of us. You know, I'm a person, I love looking at other people's work. So, you know, feel free to shoot me some work or anything. You know, I love finding new works, you know, so everybody have a beautiful Sunday. Peace out. I'm going to go take pictures.
Okay. Take care. Be safe.
Have a good one.
Bye.